Hello, everyone. My name is Maryam Jaoussi. I am a rising senior major in economics, and today I will be giving you a rather TED talk about one of the most wonderful architectural masterpieces found to be in central Morocco, and it is known to be Ait-Ben-Haddou. So let's get into it. Okay, we can start off with this. So I don't know if anyone's ever been to Morocco, and I also don't know if anyone's ever seen a village or a small town made out of clay from about 500 years ago. But I am actually half Moroccan, and apparently my dad said I had been to Ait Ben when I was about 2 years old, although I have no recollection of it. But I'm here to give you guys a little bit of a history behind it, so this should be exciting. So it is known mostly to be as al-Qasad of Ait-Ben-Haddou, which is translated into castles of Ait-Ben-Haddou. And it is found located in the central Morocco. You can actually see the Atlas Mountains, although they aren't exactly near Ait-Ben-Haddou. But the way the architects had been building the village itself was to make sure they could see everything within the vicinity, whether it be near or far. And that kept a good lookout for their intruders and just making sure they were protected at all times. Another way to approximate it is that it's found about 18 miles away from Ouarzazate, and that is a small town within the same area of the central region. And it also is found near a more common area that people know of, which is Marrakesh, and that is about 107 miles or 173 kilometers from Ben Haddou. Ait-Ben-Haddou has actually been shown in throughout the years in many cinematic experiences, and actually most recently in Game of Thrones. Although I did not watch it, I have heard throughout my research and other people that it was shown in an episode of it. So I think that's really, really cool. So yeah, we can now get into the architects and giving them credit where credit's due. So since Ait-Ben-Haddou was built between the 11th and 17th century, the architecture himself is or herself is actually unknown, although they do believe that the Amazigh Berbers were the ones who created the village and had built it right out of clay. So who are the Amazigh Berbers? I'm actually a descendant of an Amazigh Berber myself. My dad comes from the Saharan region of Morocco, and we have family who still live there, which is always a great culture shock to me going back and visiting them whenever I do. But so anyways, Amazigh Berbers were individuals that long descended from tribes within Morocco, and they're one of the many tribes that were in Morocco way before it became what it is today. And back then, there were the Muslim conquerors and just from Islamic regions, specifically like Middle Eastern regions, whether it be present-day Turkey, Levantine areas, and they had been conquering the North African regions at the time. And so what the Amazigh Berbers did was they had to go flee and seek protection. And so what they ended up doing was they went to Ait-Ben-Haddou and essentially built a village right out of clay. Which will be shown very shortly. And it is an architectural piece that still remained intact in today's time. So let's get into the first image. So this first image, I actually like to call it Architecture, Life and Death. And it specifically just goes back to how the Amazigh Berbers are basically trying to seek survival and to seek making sure they could stay living. And that was basically what this architecture sort of meant to them. And I thought that was a very important purpose, because architecture can mean so many things to so many people. It could simply just be a way of expressing emotion or feelings. And in this case, the Berbers and the individuals who ended up building this area were just sort of trying to live life and keep on living every single day. And this entire village is just remaining proof of it. So we can start off by just looking at the fact that they had so much land in front of them, but yet they still ended up sort of creating a clusteral, overlapping cake level, as we had learned in class, of the village Haddou. So why is that exactly? Essentially because they were a tribe and they had come from sort of one area and they were all very close. This close intact was actually used towards their advantage in making sure they could stay protected and sort of shielded from their intruders and invaders in case they were to come and fight and try to hurt them. So this clustering and overlapping of homes made sure that they could be elevated off the ground. They wouldn't be scattered around sorts of places, and make sure they could all stick together as one in case the community and the town needed to come in together and make sure they could fight it off. In addition, you can see how the village is not spread out at all, and essentially is also sort of creating a barrier where it would be very difficult for the intruders and invaders to try to come in, because it isn't very easy to come onto. Many stairs and many elevated surfaces are where the residential homes were occurring. And that was always used towards their advantage in sort of having like a left leg off from the intruders in case of danger. This first visual is a 21st century image and is also titled Ait-Ben-Haddou. So we can now get into the minimalism and clay. So as I mentioned beforehand, these people were just, the Amazigh individuals were literally just trying to live day by day, and no way were they trying to live extravagantly, but rather just trying to find an area where they could survive and essentially keeping their history and their culture alive within their people. And here's where clay comes into place. Clay is a very known material source. It's not only used in North African regions, but also is used in the Middle East. My mother comes from Palestine, so is the other half of my family. And we have many homes there that I've seen in the past that have been baked out of clay. And it's been shown to be a great source in terms of compacting heat, minimalism, and just making sure people can have a sustained house living, and has been shown to be rather sturdy throughout the years. So essentially what the clay was most useful for was the fact that during the winters and summers, since Morocco is one of those countries with all four seasons, except for rain, that during the summertime, the clay would essentially allow for cooling of the area. A lot of people will use clay and put water in it to keep the water cool. And in the winter times, we do the opposite. So since it would be really cold outside, the clay would sort of come together and sort of create this kind of hot, warm environment for individuals to be living in, and that allowed them to sustain throughout the year. In addition, clay is not a very colorful texture material, and so that allowed them an advantage of being sort of disguised in the middle of the Sahara Desert. You don't want your enemy to see you, and that's exactly what they were able to succeed at. So the clay sort of was simple. They built squared clays with flat roofs that would also help them in terms of war, and just sort of being able to make sure they didn't need it for any precipitation, which is why there's any triangular shape on top. And in addition, the clay was helpful for making sure they kept a good warm temperature or cool temperature in the summers. And it was simple and did not cost much for them to make either. This picture is said to be from the 17th century, and it sort of gives you the qasar feeling, which is castles. And you can see it sort of looks like, if you want to compare it to Cinderella's castle, because in a Disney movie, it sort of does have like overlapping cylindrical shapes, except here you have sort of like little squares overlapping on one another. And that shows you a beautiful clustering image of the clays. So now we can get into the little details. So the little detailing here, it comes from the 20th century image. And we can get into more detail about these roofless tops and why this sort of came also as an advantage for the Amazigh and Berbers. So essentially what they wanted to do was, if you can go back to the previous image, was that they had very little windows, as if you can see from here, and that allowed for very little light and light exposure. And that actually came at a great advantage, because what they had in mind, and I've actually got this from a video that I will be showing you in a second, but the narrator essentially explained that when an intruder came in, usually when you walk into a room and, like, let's say you're getting ready for bed, you were to turn off the lights right away, your eyes would have a harder time adjusting to the light because you had just seen light beforehand. And so what they would do is the sun coming out from the top would sort of blind or pre-blind the invader when they're about to come in, because they would see pitch black, and that would give the Amazigh Berbers enough time to sort of catch their invader or defend themselves from getting hurt. And that came at a great advantage. And it could be shown here. In addition, the little windows and shutters just allowed for cooling environments once again, and also allowed this little saal over here was just like a sort of way of sort of directing people into their little halls, because once again, it was a tribe full of close family members. And so you most likely had multiple siblings and parents living within the same residential area. So now I was thinking to show you guys two small little clips of a sort of a visual cinematic piece. So the first one is a Moroccan man from the 21st century renovating his residency in Ait-Ben-Haddou. So as I mentioned previously, it still seems intact today, and it's not only used as a touristy area, but it's also used as a residential area, and people still live the way the Amazigh Berbers were living back then in today's time. So here's a little clip about that. Oops, sorry.
Her husband is fixing the wall. The earthen walls are 50 centimeters thick and keep the room temperature comfortably cool, even in conditions of extreme heat over 40 degrees centigrade. Exposed earthen walls can deteriorate over time. The building can be ruined without constant repair work. The village was built 500 years ago. Its adobe walls continue to preserve and protect a quiet way of life.
So yeah, it's quite fascinating that people are still living in Ait-Ben-Haddou today, especially just it's just a different type of environment and lifestyle where people can still live on day to day and their simplistic lifestyles, and just being able to use once was one just a place for survival, and sort of just trying to stay away from the world, and now has become such a attraction to the rest of the world. And so here the second video talks about an area or a sector of Al-Qusur, and it's called Al-Qasaba. And what Al-Qasaba translates to is a big house. And what the big house was used for was essentially tribal kings or like people of high status within the tribe would actually get the Qasaba, and that would sort of be like their house. And in the video, he just shows you like sort of remains of what a Qasaba is. The narrator is speaking in Arabic, so I'm trying to translate as much as possible. In addition, he does mention that usually you would have four steps, and those 4 steps would give a sort of a hierarchy status for the qasaba within the actual castle. So here is a quick little video.
القصبة هي بيت كبير لواحد من الأعيان ديال القبيلة.
You can see the 4 steps over there that lead up to it.
وكيتميزوا عن البيوت الأخرى لأنه كبير وعنده واحد 4 ديال الأبراج دايرين به من 4 ديال الأركان. هذا هو الفرق بين القصر والقصبة. القصبة هي بيت كبير داخل القصر.
And so yeah, it's just an extra little big, well, actually it's not a little, but it's a big house that is included within the residency. And that just gets to show you that the architects also thought of social status and making sure that distinction was shown within their architectural pieces. And that's just, it's another great and unique way of expression within architecture that people usually just don't look at. And so in saying that, the Amazigh people were able to essentially embed everything within a society that would last 500 years and be able to tell a story today within just a small little village made out of clay. And I think that's very important and just insightful to look at, because we live in a time where we probably wouldn't see much of that unless we looked at it. And I am half Moroccan, but still had to do research on Ait-Ben-Haddou. And it was sort of interesting to know that there were people from my time, well, not my time, from my place that had been living like this and were able to survive and sort of leave that legacy within just a piece of architecture that could tell a million stories. Here's my citations. And yeah, I hope you guys were able to learn something today. And yeah, please go to visit Ait-Ben-Haddou if you can. I really hope I can, and I will try to go make sure I can do that trip next time I'm in Morocco. So thank you so much and hope you have a great day. Thank you.